Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversation in Horror. My name is Kevin L. Powers. I'm also the founder and operator of Something Wicked Entertainment Events, and welcome to our show today. If you ever wondering why I'm a little bit off today, it's because we have been discussing a bunch of franchise movies, and if you watch too many of these movies in a row, your brain starts to melt. That being said, if you are familiar with our show, what we do is we take one particular film and we discuss it as kind of a general conversation. Not so much as a critique and analysis, but it is as a means to just kind of figure out whether or not we like the film, whether we hate the film, whether or not you, as our audience, should enjoy the film or even bother to even look it up to watch it. Which brings us to our franchise month. Now, we know a lot of people out there may have seen the first film or second film in a particular franchise, but not so much seeing all the third, fourth, fifth, or sixth sequels. But what we are doing now is we are releasing episodes based on each individual movie in a particular franchise all in one day, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. And me and my guests, which can vary between each film in the franchise, are going crazy watching all these movies for you. And so the franchise that we're talking about today is the Final Destination franchise, but we are on part two. So from Final Destination 2, do we have a date for this one, Philip? Because I'm not sure.
Final Destination 2 came out in 2020, came out in 2003.
So thank you, Philip, for answering that. 2003 is Final Destination 2. And for everyone out there listening, that is my special guest for today, Philip, who we have been discussing several of the other Final Destination films, not particularly in order, mind you, which is really screwing with our brains here. But we hope to get through all that by kind of delving deep into each one of the films so that you don't have to, unless we decide that it is a film that you should go out there and see. That being said, we're going to, with the first film in some of these franchises we've been doing this month, the first film we haven't been going into a lot of details in terms of plot and all that type of stuff because we hope that you've already seen the first film. But the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on of these franchises, we are going to delve a little bit more into some of the plot elements for you in case you haven't seen these films. So please forgive us if you have seen these films of some of the stuff that we may be repeating, but we're hoping that for new viewers who have never seen the film, this will be extremely helpful for them to decide whether or not they should go out and seek the film or not. So we're going to talk about Final Destination 2 from 2003 right now. And I saw the movie I'll just preface this with every one of the Final Destination films, as I saw them all at the theater when they were originally released, but I didn't necessarily go back and rewatch many of them myself after seeing them initially. So it's good to go back and revisit some of these films, especially this one, which I haven't seen in 22 years. Philip, on the other hand, I don't know when or if he saw this one, but we're going to go ask him now. Philip, what was your first experience seeing Final Destination 2?
I ended up was not able to see it in theaters because I was a little too young at the time, but I ended up seeing it on TV with I think probably the Sci-Fi Channel.
Sci-Fi Channel. So for everyone who may have not seen this one, it kind of takes some of the ideas from the first film. It kind of expands upon them, changes them, and kind of makes it's a sequel. It's the first sequel, so they haven't really defined all the rules and trying to make them up as they go along and change some of them. But the thing about this film is the highlight and the scene that is most talked about in most of the franchise is the beginning and opening car crash sequence for this film, because it was an amazing piece of cinematography, and it was actually really well done with all the people dying. Now, if you saw the first Final Destination, you know that one had a plane crash at the very beginning. This one has a car crash at the very beginning, or a pileup as well, which has the lead character, what's her name? Kimberly, played by AJ Cook. She is with her friends going to enjoy a little summer vacation when this car crash / pileup happens and all of her friends die. And then she comes back and she realizes that it's a premonition. She's been getting hints of the story from the first film, from the radio and other such things, these little coincidences. But she immediately knows what has happened to her because she's been hearing about it for like the last year, since the events for the first film have already are only a year past, and still readily in people's consciousness. They're all readily aware of the events from the first film. But that car wreck that she prevents from happening allows a lot of people to survive that shouldn't have to survive. And then, as death will have it, death will come for them one by one, until the end of the film.
Yep. So again, like I'll say, kind of like we indicated, the one of the most iconic things about this movie was the pile up with the logs, that with the log truck, that I can say for anyone who's ever seen this movie has traumatized them on driving behind a car with really with cars with anything log related. I mean, it was so famous that when Final Destination Bloodlines came about, they actually had some trucks drive around with the like fake wood logs on the back of their car, hinting about the Final Destination 2 one, because it was very iconic.
It
It
was.
definitely is something that people watch today is definitely like has definitely was burned into their brain.
So much burn that some people who were driving behind actual log trucks would avoid those log trucks at all costs. I know my sister, who like my the reason why I've seen all these movies in theater, mind you, other than me being a horror fan, is that my older sister, who's almost 10 years older than me, is an absolute love fan of this franchise. She has to see them every week they come. The weekend they come out, she has to see them. Like, she loves these films, and I bought them all for her as they were coming out. She's seen them 100 times. This is one of her favorite franchises there is. I keep hoping that I can get her on the show one day to talk about some of the franchise that she likes. But we won't get her for this one. But she absolutely loves this franchise, and that just kind of solidifies certain audience members for these type of films, because the great thing about this film is that it's always keeping the audience on the edge of their seats and on the tippy toes with the suspense, because you never know what's going to happen, and you don't know who's going to happen to or when.
Yeah. Uh, but yeah, no, so the start of the movie, that was very great. Now, another thing with this movie, and another reason why this movie was done so well, the director, uh,
Let's
David Ellis, before this movie, he was mostly like, he was the second unit director. Uh, he filmed a lot of like famous action scenes like Waterworld. He filmed some of the action scenes with Matrix Reloaded. He filmed the Quidditch scene in Harry Potter. So like for him, he was very used to doing a lot of the action sequences, which is why for Final Destination 2, a lot of them, especially that beginning, will look so well even today, was because of the fact that he was used to filming like that.
Mhm.
And I would say that's one of the things, first talking about this movie, is compared to the first one, they definitely cranked up the gore majorly. In the first movie, there's is very tamed in comparison to the rest of the
Mhm.
series, um, where, probably the most brutalish deaths would be like a character getting stabbed from a knife falling on them, or being
Mhm.
strangled to death, versus this movie where it's like from the get-go, no, it is brutal. You are seeing logs go through people's heads. You are seeing people get decapitated by elevators, or literally getting cut in half by barbed wire. Like,
Mhm.
that is Final Destination 2 definitely set the tone for the rest of the series, in the sense of the gore sense of it, where it became more, it lost a little bit of its Rube Goldberg, in my opinion, with the deaths. Uh, there's some deaths that were still Rube Goldberg, but some of the deaths were less Rube Goldberg.
Mhm.
But uh it definitely set the precedent for the series to go more gorier. It became for an audience member, okay, how gory are they going to get with these deaths?
Yeah, yeah, no, no, I agree with you. The I love a lot of the deaths in this film, especially when the one kid, I think his name is Tim, gets smashed by the glass, and you kind of see all of that happen. Um,
The quotation young character who is clearly not young.
yes, he's the see. Unlike the first movie, which are all supposed to be teenagers, this film is made up of people of all different ages. But yes, Tim is supposed to be young, and it would have been better if they played it with a younger kid, especially when he's supposed to be in the dentist office, and then he comes out and he runs into the pigeons that create his own chaos. And I'm like, he seems a bit too old to be doing that. Shouldn't that be like a 10-year old, maybe a 12
Yes.
year old?
So originally the character was written to be 8 years old, but then executives said, well, we can't kill a young kid brutally like that. So they changed the age to be 15, and then they casted an actor who was even older than 15. So when his death happened, the audience wasn't as horrified, even though it makes a lot of his scene throughout the movie very awkward because he
Awkward.
definitely does not seem to be the type of kid to get kissed goodnight and again like run through pigeons that end up resulting in his death.
I had actually forgotten about that until I rewatched the film. So okay, oh yeah, he's supposed to be a kid who runs through pigeons, but he's not really a little kid. But okay, I'll buy that. I mean, this one does. One, I like the deaths, and I think the fact that the deaths and the way that they happen and how gory they are kind of overshadowed the fact that I just didn't care for the story as much for this one. Um, I used to when I first saw this one 22 years ago, I used to think this was better than the first one because of the log sequence. And then all of a sudden when I rewatch it, I just don't feel this one held up nearly as well as the first film. And I like one of my favorite actors of the time when this came out was Michael Landis. Because this is one of my obscure references, people. I like Michael Landis from the show Special Unit 2, which no one saw, but I have rewatched like 20 times because I love that fucking show. I'm guaranteeing you've never seen it, Philip.
Nope.
I will just tell people who have never seen Special Unit 2, it was one of the few UPN shows out there. It barely lasted 2 seasons, and those 2 seasons were barely 12 episodes or 13 episodes each. But I fucking love that show, and I kept rewatching it over and over again. And that's how I know who Michael Landis is. But pretty much the rest of the cast, other than Ali Larter, are people I didn't become familiar with till much later. Some of them starred in lots of other stuff. AJ Cook, I knew from True Calling because I still love that show too. But other than that, this is unlike the first film. I don't really didn't have like a connection with any of the cast in this one.
Yeah, the thing with the cast with this is kind of like with the first one. Like you actually kind of remember at least a good chunk of the cast in the first one versus this one where yeah, other than Ali and maybe AJ Cook and Michael Landis, all the other characters aren't very that memorable.
Mm-mm.
Um, and some of them again, some of the characters get kind of stupid and frustrating. Uh, at least in the first movie, the because it was the first, you can buy people being a little bit skept, like people not like thinking anything of it. But the movie this time around tries really hard to connect to the first one in a lot of ways. Um, so the problem is, and the characters themselves know about the first movie, and
Yeah,
so this is when we start getting the trend a little bit of characters believe, well, it gets changed later, but the idea of the characters starting to believe, oh, death is actually coming after us. What should we do? Unfortunately, they didn't go fully into it with this movie. So you have characters going like, "Oh, I believe you," to well, no, I don't believe you anymore, randomly just so they can end up getting themselves killed by it. So there's a lot of character really dumb decisions throughout this, like that and then we have the introduction of Clear coming back
Mm.
without Alex Brownie, the Alex Brownie character, which apparently he was supposed to come back originally, and that didn't happen. There's a lot of back and forth about it was a combination of the actor Devin did not want to come back for scheduling reasons. There's also potentially money conflict that they didn't want to pay him enough money that he felt he didn't want to come back, and also rumors that they never ever considered him in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, so he ends up getting killed very unceremoniously off screen,
Yeah.
which was kind of a major letdown. But
Yeah, because he was killed by a brick.
yeah.
It's the story we don't get any details. We just kind of get the story that he got killed by a brick, and we just go with it.
Oh, if you think that's bad, before that, then alternate death for him was going, which again was going to be off screen, was he was going to be killed by some flesh-eating virus. So either way, he did not have any fun deaths lined up for him. I mean, even that scene is very awkward because, and this is the weird thing they did because they kind of show you they do a news clipping. The
Mhm.
Kimberly character ends up finding a news clipping about Alex dying, but then they have another scene later where, for whatever reason, Clear has a picture of the moment he died, which makes zero sense. It's like, what, did you just like take a picture of Alex after he died? Like, oh my gosh, I guess I should take a picture of this if it ever becomes relevant later. Or she just randomly got a picture from, I guess, a police reporting. It's just a really awkward scene to kind of like, the idea is to drive home is like, yes, Alex is dead. He's not coming back. But it's just done a little sloppily.
Well, a lot of stuff in terms of the story is sloppily done. Like I had forgotten that the whole thing with Isabel, uh, the whole entanglement with the Isabel character, who's a pregnant woman who AJ Cook's character thinks Kimberly thinks dies in the wreck, and so they have to find her to what they think or believe is to stop the whole death sequence from happening. I thought that was a weird little added story element that kind of took away from what they could have done. Um, I know they wanted to set up the whole thing with the ideal that you can subvert death by bringing new life into the world and all that type of stuff, and that's something that kind of resurfaces throughout the entire franchise from here and there. I
Yeah, it ends up resurfacing again, kind of. It's interesting that Bloodlines kind of references that, but does the opposite in its ideology of that. So it's funny because I mean, obviously, the idea that even if, let's say, Isabel was going to have died, technically by Bloodlines logic, that doesn't mean anything. It just means another character's going to die now. But yeah, it was the whole concept of like creating new life was kind of a weird added to the mythology. I think they felt they needed to give the characters an out. So that was, I guess, understandable. But the thing with the Isabel stuff, honestly, how it felt to me to a point was it felt like they just needed that to give an excuse to kill off Clear. Because again, like Clear makes some really dumb decisions with that too.
Yeah.
And that ends up getting her killed. And it's just the problem with this movie with that is a lot of characters make kind of dumb decisions to get themselves killed. And it feels like they needed to do that so that they could get themselves killed. Versus in the last movie where again it was because again none of the characters get a grasp of what's going on. It's fine
Yeah.
that they do questionable stuff. And here, since the characters are actually referencing that they understand what's happening, but then they still make the dumb decisions, like especially Clear's character.
Yeah.
does not make sense why she makes the decision she makes that ends up getting her killed.
Well, it also doesn't really make sense why she would leave anyways. I don't. I never. When I rewatched it, I never got the sense of why she believes that she has to help this stranger survive and why it's her responsibility. Especially,
Even if it's like, okay, she had the guilt stuff, like there's a way you can explain why the character does it, but as we've seen done better in Bloodlines,
Mhm.
the character should be like, again, like you can have the character leave to try to help these characters, but you have to write the character smart then to go, oh, again, because they write that she's aware about all the things to look out for, except when it's not convenient.
Yeah,
Again, that's one reason why Bloodlines is better. They do it better is you have a character like go, oh, I know what to look out for, so I look out for it so it doesn't get me. Versus Clear's character who just forgets all about it as soon as
yeah,
she walks out. She walks out of the she walks out of the psych ward and immediately just acts like another character.
yeah. That's and I didn't notice that when I originally saw this, but when I rewatched it, that's one of the reasons why we've discussed this already. I will say, well, I used to like part two, but now I don't. I think it's a worse film than the first one because some of the plot things, like Clear, I love Ali Lawyer, but her motivations for this movie are out the fucking window. It is all plot driven and not character driven at all. Um,
Another thing too that they add in this movie that ends up bleeding into the rest of them that also was kind of bad was the idea of premonitions. Like
oh yes,
one of the good things about the first movie was it was a mystery. It was, Alex had to try to deduce and get maybe some hints from seeing like foreshadowing of how these characters are going to die and how can he help them. And so for us as an audience, we're also trying to we're on that ride of like we don't know what's going on. So the problem in the second movie is they introduce this idea of the characters getting premonitions of how these other characters kind of die, but then they end up being kind of wrong, but like which gets expanded worse with the other Final Destinations. And this is the first movie that introduces that idea that it's done really kind of not it's not done that well.
no, no, I agree with you. I don't like the premonition thing. I had forgotten that that was in this movie, and I probably forgot if it was in all the other movies. But like I said, I've only seen the third, fourth, and fifth one time, so I don't remember any of that. But when I watched this one, I was like, oh, what are these? What do they need these premonitions for? Especially when she's going. So plot wise, she can see her own death and figure out eventually that it's her own death she's seeing, and that she needs to do that in order to save everyone. I was like, ah.
Well, she sees some of the other characters'
Yeah, she
deaths
sees some of the
too.
other ones too, but her own death, which she thinks is Isabel's death, is a reoccurring thing, and that's kind of the plot for the film. Is she's trying to save Isabel for a while until she realizes it's not Isabel, it's her. I was like, ah, I thought,
Which also again makes no sense because she sees I can remember the character's name. She sees Nora's death because she sees the vision of her getting killed by a hook man. But again, it's just like but then it's like okay, it's like she sees Nora's death and then she sees Isabel's death and that's it. She doesn't see any other character's deaths.
she sees Tim's in theory. With all she does is see the pigeons or the
That's right. She sees. That's right. You're right. And she sees Tim's as well. So, but she doesn't see anyone else's. It's just
yeah,
that's what's weird. Is like, okay, you're going to see Tim. You're going to see two of the characters premonition death, but then the rest of the characters are completely fine. Like, Thomas's character never gets a premonition. She doesn't get a premonition of
Eugene.
Brooks of Eugene. She doesn't get a premonition of. So it's just kind of like so it's just weird. It's weird plot. It's weird writing wise that it's like okay she only sees. It's weird that it's like okay she sees two other people's deaths and then she immediately skips to her death of seeing
Yeah,
her death and that doesn't make sense at all.
yeah, and of
Like
course, since they never get to Burke dying, we never see much of anything with him. So
yeah he just skips out and so and that's like another problem is we don't get the other thing, like in the first movie, that they don't do in this movie is the concept of, oh, if you save someone, then then we go
Yes,
down.
yeah.
So because they try to do a weird thing instead, like that doesn't happen. Like if a character submission to die, they die. They're not. There's no one gets really saved other than like kind of the Brian character at the end gets saved, but that was unrelated to what was
Yeah,
going on.
that's the yeah. When I rewatched, I was like, well, that should be completely unrelated in theory. Uh,
Because they try to do this, they try to subvert expectations by having the characters die backwards from how they envisioned
yeah,
it, because they do a reveal later, which was fine to a point. It was a interesting twist to kind of get you connected a little bit more with the first movie. It just would have been nice to also see the idea of the in the first movie, the whole saving each other kind of like helps, like keeps things, you kind of it this movie didn't do a good job of subverting expectations a lot of how a character's going to die.
yeah.
Like some characters, yes, like again, you don't see Nora's death is good, and there's a misfire there, and then same thing with the young boy's death. But then
Tim.
the rest of Tim, thank you. But then the rest of them, they just there's no subverting. Like, oh, Eugene also gets a little subverting, but other than that, the rest of them, it's just no, they just die exactly how they were. And Kat's death was so dumb.
Which one was Cat?
Kat was the one who gets impaled by the PVC pipe
Oh yeah,
because she tells the rescue worker to be more quiet, and that kills her.
yeah. The airbag, and then
Yeah.
of course I think his name is Rod gets killed by the Rube Go. I think is that the only Rube Goldberg sequence with the whole thing with the gasoline that flows through the
Yes.
pipes. That may be the only one in the whole film. Is it the only one?
Yeah, that's the only Rube Goldberg, because Norris
Because
isn't really Rube Gold. I guess Eugene's the other one that's slightly Rube Goldberg, but other than that, everyone else is pretty straightforward to how they
yeah,
die.
because Tim doesn't die in the doctor's office. It seems like that could have been one, but the thing just falls in his mouth, and he gets saved by the nurse. That was an anticlimactic one, and then of course he just gets killed by the pigeons.
Yeah, which was again a very silly death objectively. This also was this was the beginning of the series having very silly deaths, like a character dying. Like in the first movie, there really wasn't a death to me that felt ultra silly, like a character just doing something silly that results in their death, versus
Mm-hmm.
this movie. There's a lot of silly deaths, like with like again Tim's death that was just like okay.
Well, I always found that one funny is like they're actually hoisting up a piece of glass table wise instead of putting it up on its side. I was like, that seems kind of weird doing it tabletops.
Yeah. I
That's
will say one death that did for me after watching it did make me wary about it was Nora's death with the elevator. I will say that it definitely for a while after that seeing that movie, I was very wary about elevator doors. I would definitely jump into an elevator and out of an elevator very quickly.
I think about that sequence is I think they edited it took too long to get to her getting decapitated because that one has been done in other movies.
Yeah.
And so that one seems like it's the most mundane out of all the other ones. Like I like how Rod gets killed. He's the one that gets spliced at the right after Kate. Is that her name?
Yeah.
Yeah, right after her. Because I
Which
wasn't expecting his.
that was, I mean, honestly, his was probably one of the more traditional Final Destination deaths. There's
Mm-hmm.
a Rube Goldberg revolving around it. You don't, and again, it comes out of nowhere for him. It's kind of like in the first movie with uh, what was his name? With Billy's death, where
Billy.
where
John
you
Williams Scott.
again, yeah, you don't see that coming. You're just like,
Yes, yes, very much. That's exactly how it is.
So, but yeah, there was a little less subversion of expectations of again when the characters in the crosshair of death, de death didn't miss this time around versus the first movie where there was a lot of saves, and this it was like, oh, if a character's gonna die, the character's gonna die, which kind of made, I don't know, which was a little disappointing because then it made it slightly predictable to a
Yeah.
point. But yeah.
I think with this film in particular, because it was the first sequel, and they're up in the ante from what happened in the original film, which is why we get more gore, and more violence, but not necessarily a better story aspect, because essentially it is taking like 5 or 6 characters and putting them in these unusual circumstances and seeing them all die. And as an audience member, they're wanting to see how elaborate they get. It was be the same situation with the Saw franchise. If you remember that one, the first film only had to deal with really the two main characters, and then the cop character, really. But each subsequent film had to up the ante, make traps much more interesting and much more dangerous, make the blood more gory. The same thing happens with this franchise, except that we don't see death. You know.
Yeah. I will say, and as much as I complain about the Carter character in the last movie, there was a lot more characters this time around that were a lot more unlikable. Like the Rory character, Eugene was right very inconsistently, so I didn't really like him. Like it, when we talk about the other Final Destinations,
Uh,
I'll repeat the statement again, but the series continued on from the first movie of making their characters less and less likable.
yes.
You kind of felt like, okay, I don't care if you like. At this point, I'm just waiting you to die because I don't feel anything about you surviving.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you get that immediately with the second film. And that's the thing. It happened with Saw. It happens with every franchise that lasts longer than it should. The Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, the Jason Voorhees franchises, it all happens like that. The the characters become cannon fodder, except for maybe the main character. And even AJ Cook's Kimberly really just doesn't have an interesting background or story. She's almost all plot for this, and that's it. She just happens to be the one that it affects the most because she sees the premonitions and stuff.
Yeah, which I found it funny that like Kimberly watches her friend die like at the beginning of the movie when she like ends up getting out of the car because of Thomas's character, and then her friends all get killed. Uh, she just kind of shrugs that off and keeps going. She does not care at all. Again, talking about writing bad characters to see them die, I really like again this from the get-go with those friend characters,
Those
this terrible writing for them
Yeah,
just so we can get them killed right away.
pretty much. I'm about to say the same thing. I was like, when I was reviewing this, I forgot they also died. I was like, oh god, is these 4 characters that I have to watch die? And then of course they all get smashed by the truck, which was surprising to say the least, but also deserving of those characters because they're all like dum dums.
Yeah, they're dumb characters that you're happy they're dead because that means you don't have to deal with them anymore.
Pretty much, pretty much. And then from
That's what a
there,
lot of characters in this movie was like. You were happy you didn't have to see them anymore.
and then of course they die soon, and then the thing is it kind of breaks Kimberly from her normal routine, and she has to learn to trust these new characters, all of which have completely different backgrounds and have completely different experiences. That aspect I did like, but I just don't think they did anything with any of those characters to make them memorable or interesting. And
No, Thomas is the only one that kind of does that.
yeah, yeah. Thomas is, oh wait, Thomas is Michael Landis. I've been calling him Burke. I forgot his first name was Thomas.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the different thing with this one as well from the first one. This one, Thomas is a cop who actually believes everything that's going on with Kimberly right off the bat. There's no sense of this little time period where he's completely skeptical like the cops in the first movie. He's a cop who actually believes in exactly what she's seeing and feeling and experiencing because he's right there along with her.
Yeah. Which is like why he's probably the only like character that's decent. One of the side characters that are decent because again, they go right away. They go, "Oh, I recognize like, oh, we all know what happened in the first movie, so we're going to like be cautious about it." But then they're not cautious about it.
Yes, cautious. None of them are cautious about death. Not one of them.
They have no, it's like they know what's going on, but then again, they have no sense of urgency. That's why like for me, Kat's one of my most hated deaths because again, it's like she knows that's after her. She almost dies, and then her just acting nonchalantly and being like about like, oh, hey, can you like again, it was weird comedic trying to be comedic moment of like, oh, can you turn that saw on like silent mode and stuff? It's like you you are actively aware that's after you. Why are you not more worried about this?
Yeah. Well, I can see that. But I can see that of a lot of the characters in here. Like we were talking about Ali Larter's Claire. Um, the, the thing is, in the first movie, her character is so smart. She's the one who gets off the plane without being prompted to get off the plane. She just feels something and sees the truth in Alex's character. And then, of course, she starts figuring stuff out before everyone else does. But in this movie, she's like 5 steps behind everyone else, and it makes for a difficult watch for me because her character is so far removed in this film from the first one.
Yes, the thing is, the problem is with the movie is in a lot of horror movies, especially nowadays, you have the veteran character coming back, and the whole point of that veteran character is that they're supposed to wise up the current characters about what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is they already did that in this movie. The characters have already been wised up. Kimberly's already been wised up about everything that happened in the first movie, and the other characters do. So Clear doesn't add anything because the characters have already been wizened up about the situation.
Yeah. And she dies a frivolous death.
She does. And it's like the only like and this was a change is an alternate cut of her death. She smiles when she dies because it's kind of it's supposed to be a whole thing of okay, I'm finally like I don't have to worry anymore. Like I've accepted I don't have to keep running anymore, which could have been an interesting plot point of why Clear just goes out there because she's so like that could have been interesting kind of motivation for her character of she's out there because she's been running for so long that she's like, you know what? If I could save these people and die, even if I die, that's fine because I'm done running. Could have been an interesting plot point and motivation for her, but none of that's established,
No.
which is probably why they cut the scene of her smiling when she dies.
You know what? Now that you mention it that way, I can see that actually, because would make no sense with all that other context about her character. And I just there. What are the things that you like about the film?
Again, it's going to be the kills. The kills are definitely again because it raised the ante for Final Destination moving forward to having the gory kills, which again, the kills done here are really well, and again, they hold up well today because of the practical effects. Like the practical effects look fantastic that you really none of them really get too like cheesy. It is interesting though. So for it's again the opening is very iconic. It's honestly just as iconic as the explosion of Flight 180 in the first movie. You remember that because the rest of the Final Destination movies moving forward, their opening is not that memorable. And it's not really, people don't talk about Final Destination 3's opening or Final Destination 4's opening or 5's opening as much as people talk about
Not
the
this one.
first and second.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know what? You are absolutely correct. These are the two films that the opening that everyone talks about in this franchise. To be honest with you, I remember the third one being the roller coaster. I have no idea what the fourth and fifth one. I think one of them was a bridge or something. That's all I can think of. I think I'll know when I rewatch them. Huh?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
I see the one thing. This, yeah, but I could be totally wrong with that. And of course, the third one had the fun of being on a freaking roller coaster, which is another great fear that a lot of people have, just like flying planes. There's a lot of people out there with the fear of roller coasters. But with this one, this is something that every person on a day-to-day basis has to deal with because they're driving and they're driving on the highway, and they're going to have trucks, which we've all seen trucks with logs on them. I'm sure, like me, I'm definitely avoiding the trucks with the logs on it just in case. But you know what happens in this movie is like far removed from what could possibly happen. But just the ideal that it could is what scares people, and that's why I think the second movie is so damn effective for that opening sequence. This was one of my favorite opening sequences, and for the longest time, I believe the Matrix 2, whichever the hell that one's called, which also has the fight on the highway. I think if I remember correctly, so you have to get me if I don't remember this correctly. When these two movies came out, I always thought this one had the better sequence on the highway than that movie ever had. But it
Reloaded. Matrix Reloaded.
Reloaded. What year was that?
That was 2003. So this
yes,
was
it came out the same year. That's what I thought.
Same year.
I remember seeing both of these movies, and they both having the highway sequence. I thought, they hyped up the one in Matrix Reloaded so much, but when I saw this film and that film compared, I always thought that this film highway sequence was so much better realized than that one.
Well, I think that also has to do with how well the practical effects look in Final Destination 2 versus Matrix, where again you had a lot of CGI. I mean, for Final Destination, the only real CGI that was used was the logs, because originally they used real logs and they didn't like the bounce of the logs, so they CGI'd the logs. But that's it. Other than that, everything else was practical for the opening sequence, and that's why it looks so good.
Okay. See, that puts it in better perspective for me these 22 years later.
Yeah, no, everything else is practical. I think you can even watch a documentary about the filming of it. Is yeah, like other than the logs, just because they didn't like it, it didn't bounce enough for them. Everything else was practical. I mean, that is again one of the that's the only one of the big positives about this movie was, again, because the director was so used to filming action sequences. Actually, again, funny enough, like he did Matrix Reloaded. So again, he was used to filming that stuff, and so that was a one good eye he had in this was making sure that all the kills look realistic.
Yeah, yeah. And I will agree that I'm trying to think of any of them that didn't look that don't hold up, and I believe all of them still hold up really well. 22 years later, I mean, regardless of the plot for this film, it's actually really gory and really entertaining. I mean, like I said, I thought that this film was better than the first one for the longest time, only because I was simply entertained by this one more than the first film. Yeah. But I do think that when people go back and they rewatch these films, like hopefully the first one will still hold up extremely well, and the second one people will remember the gore sequences because they are this is the film where they start being like overly excessive, and then people started to comment on those gore sequences for each person's death. Oh, the person who gets killed in the tanning bed. Oh, the person who gets killed. It starts with this one, and it just progresses even crazier with each subsequent film. And thankfully, I don't remember any of the other films, so when I rewatch them, it will all be new to me again.
One fun thing too, and we'll talk about. I'll say this again for the Final Destination 3's episode, but Mary Elizabeth Winston auditioned for this movie because she liked the first movie and she wanted to join the series, and she was not casted in this one, but she did get cast in this third one, the next one up.
Oh my
She
god.
originally auditioned for this movie and was passed up, but we see her again in the next one.
Oh my god. Interesting 6 degrees of separation for this. I think I said 6 degrees, yeah. uh because the this franchise, as I saw each of them at the theater, they each became a kind of a cultural thing for me. Not only because me and my sister were going to go see them at the theater, and me and my sister always go out. She's 10 years older than me, so there's a huge gap in between us. We kind of found these films and a couple other franchises as our go-to franchise when they came out. You know? But this is one of those because of that. This was a franchise that I grew up watching as they came out and enjoyed them for what they were when they came out. These were never films that kind of elevated horror. They were never films that kind of did something with the horror genre that I wasn't already seeing in other films. They were a means of being an entertaining value. And so some of the story and character aspects I kind of overlooked when I was younger. But as you get older, you rewatch these films with a more critical eye. You realize that those are the elements that could have made them great movies, but they're missing. Like the first Final Destination movie, I told we've discussed that one. I've said that movie still holds up extremely well. And after having seen Bloodlines, it's going to be hard for any of the movies in between to actually measure up to those two films, the first film and the last film, which are so extremely well done in terms of character and plot and execution and visual effects and practical effects. Whereas these other films they'll sacrifice the story for the great visual effects. So that's how I see them now. I'm hoping not as we go through and rewatch the third, fourth, fifth film. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think for better or worse, there are some good things. Again, the good thing this movie introduced was the gory kills.
Uh-huh.
That again were elaborated well in the others, but also got a little overkill with some of them. It kind of got the Saw effect where it became that's only the focus, and then but definitely this movie will introduce some bad things that ended up getting continuously expanded upon in future movies as well.
So, for everyone out there, we have gone over a little plot of the film and we've touched on a lot of aspects of the characters in this film. So, hopefully, you have a better ideal of what to behold in Final Destination 2. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you're a huge fan of the franchise or you've never seen many of them, a lot of these same plot points appear in all of the films in the franchise, and we'll be discussing those in later episodes. But for the most part, in this film, we discussed the entire ideal behind the plot, a lot of the death sequences, and you have a general idea of what this film entails. So, with that, do you have any final words other than what you just discussed, Philip,
Nope,
about Final Destination 2?
no, that's it. Other than again, after you watch this movie, definitely you'll want to avoid logging trucks for the rest of your life.
All right. So for everyone listening to this show, what we do now is we like to rate the movies from 1 to 5, 1 being very horrible, 5 being an excellent film. Where on the spectrum of 1 to 5 do you place Final Destination 2 from the year 2003?
For me, this is purely because of the deaths were done very well. I would give it a 2.5.
2.5, 2.5. Okay. I am going to give it still. I'm still gonna be a little bit more generous. I'll still give it a 3. Mostly because this one, despite the lack of character aspects and motivations that I would have preferred, the movie is still entertaining. And for me, sometimes entertaining goes a long ways. I know that as we journey to third and fourth and fifth, those aspects will go and dwindle more and more and more. But regarding this one, the second film, the first sequel in the franchise, I believe that it still holds up. It may not be critically acclaimed. It may not hold up in terms of those aspects, but in terms of entertaining aspects, it's one hell of a joyride, especially watching the deaths of everyone in the film. So, with that, I would like to thank you, Philip, for joining us on Conversations in Horror after we discussed the movie Final Destination 2 from 2003. We always enjoy when you come and join us on these conversations. For everyone else out there, we want you to check out all of the films in our franchise month. We will be delving deep into all of the movies in Final Destination franchise as well as other franchises. So make sure to check out all of the episodes. It may be a little daunting to listen to some of these, especially for films that you may or may not ever wanted to see. But, we hope that you take a chance on us just talking about them. You can find your episodes on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, and YouTube, as well as find our sister podcast, Conversations in 4Color, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe, do that thing you do with all your favorite podcasts. And from everyone here at Something Wicked Entertainment, we wish you a pleasant day and keep watching the rest of the films in the Final Destination franchise. Have a good day. Conversations in Horror is a Broken Lighthouse Pictures production, written, produced, and directed by Kevin L. Powers, executive producer Kelly A. Inoka. All contents and material from this episode of Conversations in Horror is copyright 2025 Broken Lighthouse Pictures.